never had a choice. It doesn't have to be fun to be fulfilling. We're not here to play around.
Kamille Rogriguez.
Kamille.
I just realized that if I wasn't going to work as an artist, I was really going to be depressed. Something was just eating away at me until I did it. I felt like I was so late. I felt like I had missed so many opportunities and other people had things figured out that I just didn't. Because at a certain point, I just felt like it was hopeless. Talent is one thing, but you have to work. I think people think of artists as just crazy and you're just doing things. Everything is zen and it's just coming to you. The imagination has to come from somewhere real for me. I needed to focus on one thing, and environments were the most fulfilling. I just spent a lot of time, burned a lot of midnight oil.
Do you think that's catching up now?
I chose Fern Gully. It was just so central to that part of our culture. The environments and the world of Fern Gully are a character. This movie was in its own category. It's just a weird ride. You never really know what's going to happen next. It's amazing that it was made.
Quick one, I wanted to speak directly with you all before we jump into this episode. As you can see, we're scaling up and shifting course. Inspiration is always something that has fascinated me. And I've always had the urge to uncover and share my findings with all of you here. And I promise that is exactly what I'm going to keep doing. How I'm doing that is evolving into these conversations. So one favor, if you've ever watched this show, and especially if you've enjoyed it or learned something new and interesting, do me a favor and follow on this platform or just share these videos around. It really, really helps me scale up the production, scale up the guests, so everything just gets bigger and bigger. And I promise I will repay that gesture by making sure everything gets better and better and bigger and bigger. How does that sound?
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. This is really an honor.
It's an honor for me. I love your work. I know I discovered your work through you talking to me, but it's incredible.
I appreciate that.
Really good. I want to just ask, for anyone who might not know who you are, could you, in your own words, tell us a bit about yourself?
So currently I am a visitive artist at Netflix Games. It's been a long, windy road to get to that point.
Yeah.
Before that, I worked as a motion designer for a few years, and it's kind of where I cut my teeth in my career. Before I decided that I hated that and I wanted to switch back to my first love, which was drawing and illustration. So I just spent a lot of time, burned a lot of midnight oil to make that transition, and I eventually started to get work. And my first job was at a Disney show, a light show for a Disney theme park. So that was my first introduction into entertainment, and I've just been working since then. At this point, I'm more interested in getting projects or being invited onto projects that allow me authorship. And, it's not about ego, honestly. It's just about having a fresh perspective on a thing so that I'm not just a pair of working hands. Yeah. And I think I've reached a certain level of confidence that I feel like I can contribute that.
I mean, that's a hard thing to master, all, and it's an experiential thing. I think it generally comes with age. There's a lot of students that hope that they can do that straight away.
For sure, yeah.
They want to make an impact on where they work, but it's always it's not always possible. It's very rare few that come out of college and art direct, difficult road to walk. How was it for you, that experience?
I mean, it was hard. It was always really hard. I think that, like I've told you before, I've always had to be very self-sufficient. I have always had to support myself. I went to school during the 2008 recession, so that took a big hit on my La La Land perspective.
You
were
in college then?
When I was in college, yeah. I think it was maybe my second year of college. So, yeah, I think that, I had other personal family things, so it was just sort of like a lot of stop and go with school. And in addition to that, I was just so eager to go to art school that I didn't really give myself a lot of time to think about why or what I wanted to do. So when I got there, I was just playing in the mud, right? I was just doing everything. And that didn't put me in the best position when I graduated in terms of marketability. So
interesting.
So I had a lot of random jobs from that point, through college and then after. I've had almost every single job. Like when I was in college, most of the time I was a dog groomer. That was supporting me. And, I love dogs, but that job is so hectic that it makes you sort of like...
do you mean dog grooming is actually grooming dogs, not a groomer that's like someone who works on rigs.
Oh my God, that's such a tricky word now.
Yeah, but it's like I'm so deep into animation terminology that's the first thing that came. I was like, wow,
That's so funny.
Yeah, just grooming dogs for
Just,
films.
yeah, washing them and brushing them.
Why did you pick that? What was the?
I mean, I just love dogs, and I think that it was an easy thing to do when I started doing it. I was like 17, so it was an easy like first job. It was either that or like waiting tables, and I had already done the waiting tables. Yeah. So anyway, I did that for a while, and then there was a long slew of other jobs. I was a door-to-door salesman. I worked in retail. I did everything. I just had to work.
I never knew you were a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah.
What did you sell?
I sold vacation packages, and it was probably the worst time of my life because I like people. I think I do well with one-on-ones like this, but I'm super introverted. So putting myself out there like that was really uncomfortable. But I learned a lot, and I remember very distinctly my last day of work. I was in traffic to get to this place that I didn't want to go to, and I rear-ended someone because I was just so deep in my thought about how much I didn't want to go there. And that was it. I just didn't go. I like called them and told them that I had gotten into an accident and I wasn't going to make it, and that I wasn't going to come back. And that was it. There were a lot of other paths that led me to eventually realizing that I couldn't keep working jobs and avoiding what I really wanted to do. Because at a certain point, I just felt like it was not pointless, but hopeless. I felt like I was so late. I felt like I had missed so many opportunities, and other people had things figured out that I just didn't. Mm-hmm. So, but at a certain point, I stopped caring about that. I just realized that if I wasn't going to work as an artist, I was really going to be depressed. Yeah. And it was going to just put me in a bad place. So yeah, I just started to work towards that. And that's how I ended up working in motion graphics, because I was like, okay, well, if all I have to do is learn After Effects, then that's an easy step. Like, it doesn't really scare me. I can learn this program. So I pursued that and started getting work in that. I actually studied 3D animation. I was taught how to rig, model, texture, everything. So I know the whole pipeline. Mm-hmm. But through that, I also realized that it's just a lot for one person.
Motion graphics is a heavy, heavy thing. I mean, it's nice for people who want total control across the line. You know what I mean? Because generally your execution it's just you doing it, you know, did you ever work with a team of motion graphic people as well?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. Yeah, I did work. But I found that people just didn't know where to put me.
Okay.
Because I had this illustrative background, which I think is maybe more common now. But when I was coming up, you found a lot of video editors, and I was the unicorn that knew After Effects, and I could do flashy things, and I could also draw, so I could contribute to the storyboards and the style frames. Yeah. But a lot of teams just didn't know what to do with me.
When did you decide that you were done with that?
I had gotten to the point of being an art director, leading a video team for corporate motion graphics, and I was like, well, I don't really know if this is what this is like. You know, I'm not at the top, but I could see the creative director sitting, in the office, and their work isn't that fun either. So if I'm going to grow in this field, I could just see very clearly where that was headed, and that it wasn't going to be fulfilling. And throughout my career in motion graphics, my favorite part was just doing the style frames and the drawings and the design. Just pushing keyframes around was the most of the work and the least fun. And, I don't want to say I was always pursuing fun, but if all of your work is technical, it becomes, as a creative person, really, it takes a toll.
When you say you don't want to just pursue fun, what do you mean by that?
I think it's just an immature perspective to think that, a lot of people think animation or working as an artist is fun. You should be having fun. And I actually think that it's kind of a toxic thing if you hear that a lot, especially from leadership. You should be having fun. This is fun. And it's like, well, it is work.
Yes.
And we have to take it seriously. I understand that what we're doing is cool. But if we don't have the right things in place, the right structures in place, it's not going to be fun, whether or not I'm drawing something. And on top of that, when you're on a project, especially a commercial project, it's not yours, and you have to just be okay with that. It's work again. So I think that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be fun to be fulfilling.
I really like that you say it kind of lends a toxic idea. This whole thing of corporate families or corporate fun or animation is fun and it's a big family, there's only certain people that are really able to get to say that because they're the ones who will be there the whole way through.
Sure.
And also it's a big shock to people then when they're let go. It's just like, but I thought we were a family,
Yeah.
Whereas the line is blurred so much between actual business and this kind of creative world. And people forget that because all they see is the creativity. They forget there's a harsh business that runs this in the background.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's a lesson that everybody has to learn. And being in a creative field, I think it's a little bit of a longer process of learning, especially if you're the type of person that is looking for that. And I just learned very young that that's the way it was.
You learned very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of confrontation,
Sure.
let's talk about your pick.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I chose Fern Gully. I think that I really had to dig deep into what baby Kamille loved and reconnect with that.
Camille's level 1. Yeah.
And it's a film that I watched so many times, I think to, ad nauseum, because I don't think my brother loved it. I don't think my parents loved it. I just loved it. There's some films that you can watch with your family, like Lion King. Everybody loves Lion King, and for good reason. But the fact that was kind of top of mind when you asked me to make a choice, I just had to go back to that. And
talk me through that decision then.
Let's see. I think that the fact that it is so, it came out in 92. So I would have been like 4 years old or something when it came out.
Yeah, I think I was 3.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know when I saw it. I was either 4 or maybe 6, somewhere around there. And it just, watching it, like I told you this before, watching it as an adult, I tried to think about what I was thinking when I was little. What did baby Kamille like about this? Why did I watch it so many times? And you're never really going to be able to go back to that. But I can just look at my life and see the things that have come of it. And I think that since my skill set, my specialty now as a professional is in environment design, I can kind of see that connection, because the environments in the world of Fern Gully are a character. They're a central character. They're so important. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. But I think that that was one of the reasons I had to pick it.
Well, Fern Gully, for me, I remember watching it as a kid. It's one of those films that is so centrally linked to my childhood, as it's only ever positioned itself there. I never watched it again as an adult. I've never come back to it, until you said it to me. Even though I know it exists, I see it on shelves, DVD shelves. I'm like, oh, Fern Gully,
Right.
But it's never made a reappearance in my life up until now,
Yeah.
But I don't mean that in a negative way. I always just thought to myself, okay, one day I'll watch it. One day I'll find a good reason to watch it. One day it'll come back. I'll find the time, because now it's like, how do I find the time to watch the things that I want to watch anymore?
Yeah, that's true.
It's hard. So I enjoy doing this because it's just like, okay, go and watch something, or if you don't have time to watch it, watch the key scenes out of it and remind yourself, oh my God, I'm so totally connected to this. The biggest thing that came out of Fern Gully for me was the sheer terror of machinery. When that machine that they have, I can't remember what it is, but it's like eating the trees and stuff, and they're trying to escape it at the same time. That was terrifying for me.
The leveler.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I think that I don't remember if I was afraid of it. I think I should have been.
I was.
But I was just so enthralled with the world, and I found myself really connected to Krista for some reason. I really loved her outlook.
Yes.
I think that's another thing that I thought about, because I also haven't really watched it as an adult. So I was like, why did I like this movie? There's so many other movies that came out around this time that I also liked. But this one is, it's a little bit obscure. Not everyone has seen it. I think that over the years, it's gotten a bit of a cult following, and it had kind of a ripple effect in the industry. So at this point, maybe it's a little bit more well-known.
Yeah.
But as far as that central character, I think that it was just unusual to see a character like that wasn't necessarily a princess, right? She kind of really went to the beat of her own drum, but she was very hungry to learn. That was such a huge thing. And I think that I've always been that way. She was kind of pursuing things based on her intuition as well. And her values were so strong. And again, I was so little, maybe that imprinted on me, but I just really connected with her.
The independence that she shows.
Yeah, maybe.
And the fact that she wants to go and explore this world that's forbidden,
She's not afraid.
She's not
she
afraid.
She jumps right in. She's like, I just have to go.
She
obviously.
leaves the hovel and goes to New York or wherever and finds what's out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean by that. But, if we talk about the kind of central heart of what is Fern Gully to you?
Well, again, during my research of this film recently, I guess I realized what a big social commentary that it was making about environmentalism. And maybe that's naive to not have realized that before. But I think that, again, as a kid, I just was connected with the characters in the world. Obviously, that wasn't on top of mind for me. But in the 90s, at the time that it came out, it was huge. I don't think it would have been made otherwise. It was just so central to that part of our culture.
Yeah, I think you might be right there. Because there's even shows like Captain Planet were around that time. They all had a very similar vibe. Just save the environment. There's always toxic barrels being dumped and goop that transmogrifies into horrible things. And it's like a total pushback against it. There's I've always wanted to do a video about how environmental destruction is shown in films. And you have a kind of a through line of metaphorical massive machines from the point of view of small characters. Fern Gully is one example. There's I think Once Upon a Forest is another example. Another one is there's a British show called The Animals of Farthing Wood. If you've ever seen that.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
But there's a Isao Takahata film, I think it's Pompoko, where he shows the machines like little caterpillars eating leaves and stuff. And I was like, that's such a fresh, different way to look at it. Because my opinion of, and again, I've gone back to these machines because this is what terrified me. My opinion of this when I was younger is, oh my God, if I see a big yellow machine, I'm just like, have to stop it in its tracks. Yeah.
That really imprinted on you.
The environmentalism imprinted hard on me. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, that was the goal. If you go back to, I didn't realize this either. This started as a fairy tale. The Young family that created the story, the mother, I think her name is Susan Young, correct me if I'm wrong, but she would tell this story to her kids. They're Australian. And
very Australian.
It was very just coming from a place of love for their world, their backyard, essentially. Yeah. And they had, decided that it was a story strong enough to tell the world and really pushed to make it a film. And on top of that sensibility of a place being so real carried into the filmmaking. They went to Australia. They went on a 7-week research trip. And I know that that's common now, but at the time, I don't think it's that common. Especially the production house didn't have a lot of money. This was their first and only film they ever made. So they went pretty hard.
Yeah. I remember watching the making of where they're all walking through the forests and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a good time.
And I think that that's something that's so crucial to my work as well. I think that lately, as I've gotten older, I've realized that the storytelling of a place really has to come from experience.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense for you. Because when I look at your work, when you were doing In April there recently, mm-hmm. you take a photo mm-hmm. and you transform that into your own work and your own style, but you'd find stories centered around that location, which I found fascinating. It was beautiful work.
I appreciate that. And I think that was a long struggle as well that I went through when I was developing my work and trying to break in, essentially, because I found out very quickly that I was not going to be a character designer. And I needed to focus on one thing, and environments were the most fulfilling. So I fought for a long time of how do I make environments really sing without characters? How can I tell? I know it's possible. How can I tell a story with just an environment? And it's a lot of iterations over the years, but I think that, again, Fern Gully is such a great example of that because it's giving you so much. Every emotional beat in that film is carried by the forest, by the rainforest.
Yeah. Because oftentimes in films, a setting is set as a stage for characters to live in. But I never felt like that was the case with Fern Gully, ever. It never felt like, oh, this is painted, but here's a big blank space in the center. It felt alive, the way they were whipping through the forest and everything.
and I think it's just really beautiful to see. It's such a great metaphor for having to go to a new place. Like when Zach first enters that world, he's like, I come from a city, you know, like, what is this? You talk to trees, you know, what do they say to you?
Right, yeah.
And he's just very like bravado and like, whatever, this is nothing. And, you know, we've all met that person. We have maybe been that person.
And the two construction guys as well, you know.
Yeah, the construction guys, they have like, it's a very like shallow potential, maybe a shallow representation of these different aspects of culture, but they're very real. They come from a very real place.
Yeah, it is a bit shallow.
I mean, they're
It's just
two-dimensional.
extreme. Yeah.
They're very two-dimensional, but they make the point.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's, I mean, the film is pretty tight. I think that there are some things that they probably weren't able to finish, but they were able to focus the message, I think, pretty well.
And also, you know, what I found fascinating about this when I was going through the cast list is obviously Batty, you know, that's Robin Williams' first role in a film. And I know a la Aladdin, they've got reams and reels and reams of him recording for this character. How did you think he landed in the film, in that one?
Well, it's interesting because it's the same thing with Fern Gully. Bill Croyer had 14 hours worth of footage to sift through, and I think
that's what I mean
for Fern Gully.
For Fern Gully,
I think that he was only meant to be in it for a few minutes, and they just. I mean, if you watch the film now, there's other big stars in it. You know, there's Christian Slater, there's Cheech and Chong, but they have very little screen time. And I have a feeling that was not the plan. I think that Robin Williams was just such a showstopper that they had to, you know, prioritize his performance. And, you know, again, looking at that as a kid, I loved it. You know, it's so entertaining. He's got so much heart in his performance. And I think that the environmental aspect probably attracted him to it. He's spoken about that. He really liked the message. And he fought for that role because, as you probably know, there was a lot of drama between Disney and the Croyer Productions over Robin Williams because he was also slated to work on Aladdin. And Katzenberg didn't like that.
He didn't. And as we know, it didn't end well.
Because it didn't end well.
Because he was only doing these films for his love of storytelling. And, you know, it's a big thing that people know, and I'm sure others know, but just in case they don't, that like he only agreed to do Aladdin if they didn't promote him. That he would only appear in 25% of all promotional material. So they took that to the extreme and put Genie across the top quarter of every poster.
They found the loophole.
Yeah,
very quickly,
did. And
very
so
quickly.
he refused to work with them again for the second film. But then
it shows that film is just, it doesn't hold a candle.
It doesn't. But then he came back for the third one and that shows again. You know, and that's a great film. But again, with Fern Gully, you know, when people approach something with so much heart like that, I think they're really important messages. And that's why something like this will endure for a long time. It's the same as, you know, you might see something here at Annecy where it's like, okay, you know, where's the audience? Who's the audience? You know, but you have no idea the impact a film will make on someone at any stage. You know, like who, not to pooing Fern Gully, you know, because it's a great film that we're talking about, but who could imagine that you would have picked Fern Gully?
I agree. You know, I have listened to every single one of your podcasts, and I would think to myself, what would I pick? It's a hard thing, I think, for anybody to choose.
And had you thought of, like, what was the
I think
process?
Fern Gully came in and out.
Okay.
I did have a top one, but we talked about that. And, but Fern Gully was always there. I had thought of series as well, but those kind of things came in later. To have the commitment to watch a full series and to really understand the full context, I don't think that would have been able to, you know, with my 4-year-old mind. Yeah, I think that I made this choice for good reason. And the more that I've looked back into it, it still connects with me.
Well, it's precious that the reason is nostalgia, you know, and you're able to go into your mind and find that exact reason as to why it is. Not a lot of people can do that. They just kind of, oh, well, this inspired me for this reason or that reason.
Yeah.
But it's to be able to dig back down and say, you know, 4-year-old me, because you keep saying this 4-year-old me, 4-year-old me, but you're not 4 years old anymore.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's been a while. But you're still able to connect back to that self.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but there are some parts of us that don't change, that don't leave, and for the better or worse, right? And again, I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier about having that sort of existential crisis with my life, and that I needed to really do something about my career. And, you know, something was just eating away at me until I did it. And I'm not saying everything is fine and dandy now. Obviously, life is life. It happens, but I feel really proud of what I've accomplished.
Do you remember the first time you watched Fern Gully?
First time?
Yeah. Or do you just have, I've always had it in my brain?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a first time. I think that, I can't remember what I watched before Fern Gully. I know all the films around that time, but I was forced. That's probably when I started watching movies, like sitting down and watching full movies, 4 or 5 years old. And so it was a blur of the first time.
Did your parents own it on tape, or did you rent it?
We had a VHS for sure. I think they bought it because I watched it so much.
But how did you watch it so much if they didn't own it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that I guess I loved it so much that I manipulated them.
Twisted them somehow.
I don't know. Maybe I should ask my dad about that. But that is definitely something that I just don't remember how it started. I don't know who showed it to me. It must have been, I feel like it was one of my sisters because I have older siblings, and they would feed me such beautiful content. Like my oldest sister is the one that introduced me to Harry Potter, and that changed my life in a different way. So it probably was one of them.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's really sweet. I think that's beautiful that you talk about them like that as well, that they introduce you to beautiful content.
They did. My parents did too, but there's a different thing. Like for example, my mother showed us Bambi, but I don't think it was until I was 10 years old that I saw the opening of Bambi. I didn't know.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you just think it was about a deer?
I didn't know the mother died. I was like, what is this? So yeah, I mean, again, my sisters wouldn't have done that. They would have just showed it to me. I remember the first scary movie that I watched, I had to sneak behind the couch when they were watching it at night because they were pretty strict about that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Fern Gully was fine. Were you not terrified of hexes?
I don't think I was.
You just absorbed all this. Wow.
I don't think I was. I definitely had that. It really hit me that this was a villain. This was a bad villain, but I don't think I was actually scared of it.
Really? Because when he first emerges...
I know, he's very scary.
Yeah.
And actually, I would love to see the first versions of him because I have read that the character designer, I think her name is Kathy Zielinski, she worked on Ursula before this, and they fought really hard to get her. And I think that if you watch those two performances, you'll see a lot of parallels.
That's an amazing fact.
We can get into that, but she had apparently gone through really, really scary. Like they had to take it back. They had to reel her back several times because she was going to scare the crap out of all the kids that were going to watch it. And what ends up happening is pretty scary still. So I would love to see how much farther she would have gone.
Yeah. Like how much further can you push it? I guess at this stage, what's the, obviously we know, okay, here's the big bad guy, the color, the voice, the shape, the kind of oozing.
The way he moves.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But there's something so malicious about all that.
Yeah.
Like it's so detached from the environment.
I like to use the word visceral.
Visceral.
It's super visceral.
Yeah.
And I think it goes across every aspect of that character. I mean, if you watch Toxic Love, it's such a great title, that song. But it has some sort of like vaudeville aspects to the performance that I never realized as a kid, obviously. But as an adult, I was like, whoa. And again, I can see where they were probably trying to reel her back because they were trying to make a statement, obviously, that this is a kind of a carnal thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it just serves the point so well. And what you talked about with the color, every time you go near the human part of the film, it gets much more monochromatic. Yeah. The shadows are like almost black. And I think that the way that they designed Hexus, it almost breaks the world. Almost.
I agree.
It's so different.
It is very different,
It's almost too different. But I think they serve it to you in a way that is a little bit familiar. So it's not super bizarre, but it is definitely on the edge.
Yeah, it's coming, right? Yeah. When he's released, he's just like, whoa.
Well, he starts as this almost cute little blobby thing.
Yeah.
And then he turns into this monster. He's got so many heads in that one part of the song. It is scary, but I think, I don't know, maybe it is still really beautiful. And I've always had this weird fascination with like the beautiful darkness of things. So maybe that's why.
Okay, wow. It really is speaking to all, every part of you is informed.
I guess it is.
Yeah, by Fern Gully, yeah. I had forgotten that it has music. You know, I'd forgotten that that's a thing of the era.
Such a huge part of it.
Yeah, but as a kid, that glanced over me. I don't know why I didn't connect with the music at all when I was younger. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Do you think it's because it's such an American 90s eclectic collection of music?
Maybe I think so, yeah.
Because that's one of the things that carried me through it. I loved it.
Yeah.
You have the hip hop, you have Robin Williams rapping.
Yeah, you do, yeah.
And you have this weird lizard song. Do you remember that one?
Yeah,
I'm gonna eat you or something. But all of it kind of rides that line where it's almost becoming parody. You know, every time that there's a popular thing in culture, it reaches parody at a certain point.
Yeah.
It just becomes so like churned out. So I think it's almost at that point where it becomes like children's, content, and it just still works so well. When you watch it now, it's obviously very dated, but I still love it. I just watch it I watched it 3 times over the past couple of weeks, and I just have a smile on my face.
You're so absorbed into it. No, it was because when I was rewatching the parts of it, I was like, oh my God, the music, I'd totally forgotten about this.
It's very, very eclectic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was probably why I didn't. But it's the same as something like Prince of Egypt. When I first watched that, I didn't connect with the music at all. But in since I've watched it as an adult, I'm like, this is some of the best music I've ever heard in my life.
It's very sophisticated.
Sophisticated. Yeah.
This one is not trying to go there.
No, not with the music. Yeah. But I love what you say about Hexus being carnal. I think that's a perfect description. That's an amazing thought, because it's like, what are they trying to represent is so clear. It's like, this is bad. You're pure. Making bad things. It's pure bad, and this is the result of environmentalism. And that's part of the reason why I was like, stop cutting down the trees. Yeah. You're going to release the blob monster.
Yeah, they were really effective with that. And I think that's another reason why I loved it so much, because I didn't find it preachy. I don't find it preachy.
Yeah, it doesn't.
They are just able to really focus you on the characters, and you are able to root for who you're designed to root for.
Yeah. And
the carnal aspect, I think, even goes to all aspects of the film, even on the Fern Gully side. When you have, like I was talking about, the lizard song.
Yeah.
He's got his tongue out. He's like licking things. It is very.
I'll never
physical.
forget that. Yeah.
It's super physical, and that happens quite a few times. There's a lot of physicality to the character animation.
Yeah, the animation I think is very, very good for for the time and the budget, everything like that, because it is a good study, and I think they're very economical in how they present scenes. I think they are very, very smart in how they do stuff like that, because it's Fern Gully, the last rainforest. You're trying to show a beautiful rainforest, but how do you do that with lesser money, lesser budgets, and you have this mad variety of characters? Like there's a lot, there's obviously the animals, the fairies, you've got the human guys, you've got Hexus. If you presented that now, people would be like, oh my God, there's a lot, we have to do a lot here, but they somehow managed to hold on to the reins.
It's amazing that it was made.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah.
I think if it was made at any other time, it would be a big ask, for all those things. And with Batty, he's an animal. Anytime you ask them to design an animal, it's just like, okay, hold on. We have to plan this very carefully, because it's no joke.
Yeah.
But they went full force on it. And I love that you brought up that aspect, because I think that you can't help but put it in context of other films around it in the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You look at Krista and some people that have no history with it. Well, it's just, a knockoff Tinkerbell. But I disagree entirely. She has a similar vibe, but her appeal is very different.
Yeah.
And I think that the design intention of the film entirely is very different. And I think maybe that's another reason why I connected with her, because she has, the Disney princesses they're very coiffed, right? Her hair is up and it's very neat, and they're usually blonde.
She's very spiky.
She's wild, and it is exactly in line with Fern Gully, because she's in a wild place.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with the other characters. With I think his name is Pip, her maybe boyfriend. I think that was probably one of the storylines that got cut.
Yeah.
And then you have the Cheech and Chong characters that are riding these like beetles around. It's so bizarre. I think that there was more to that too.
You think so? Yeah.
Well, if you remember, there is a part where Zach is showing them the tape recorder, and they're having this like little concert.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and Pip doesn't like it. He wants to take Zach out
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
boys.
Yes, yeah,
But
yeah.
she stops it. And I really always wanted to see where that would go. Like, where is he going to take them?
Do you think that they would have planned more of that?
I think they
could
did. I think they had more planned for that.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you read something about that, or you just?
No, I
it's
just
in
have
your
an
heart?
intuition about it. Because again, you have Christian Slater, you have Cheech and Chong. They must have had so much there for them to do.
Yeah.
And those characters are very underutilized, in my opinion.
They are. Yeah. They are underutilized totally because they're just there for the shits and giggles. Really.
Right.
You know, that's it.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
But I think that one scene to me really pinpoints that, you know, there were some cuts.
Because again, look, the animation pipeline for anyone who, well, I assume everyone who listens to this understands animation to some degree.
Sure.
But, you know, the pipeline is a bit of a beast in that sense.
100%.
Yeah, it's a monster when it starts ripping things apart. And it's unfortunate to see the cuts that end up on the floor, especially. But, you know, everything is to serve the story. And you have to ultimately ask yourself, what were they adding to the story? But really, they're showing the beauty of that world.
Right.
The fun that exists in that world and how appealing it is to other people. And it's, you know, you can have this emotional connection to the forest, but really the best way to connect to people is to laugh and have a good time,
Right.
you know, and that's totally what they're providing, you know, as opposed to let's fight the machine, you know, stop the machine and Batty with his nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to go into there. I think we should talk about Maggie a little bit. We haven't mentioned her, the mentor that Krista has. And this is another thing that I really admired about that character because Krista, again, she's young. She wants to live her life. She wants to do things. And she really wants to be a good student. She wants to learn. She's hungry to learn, like I said earlier. But she is distracted, right? She's young. She wants to play. But she has such a respect for this mentor that maybe imprinted on me as well. I've always looked for mentors throughout my life. And it is something that I also connected with as an adult, maybe more than a kid. But she always went to her for help. She didn't go to her father.
Yeah.
You know, she went to the wise, you know, key figure of her society, essentially. And this woman is always alone. She has a very different design than anybody else. It's not even clear to me that she has a body under those clothes. Because she's the only one that has a design that looks like a flower, like a mushroom. And there's one flower that she's near at a certain point that is exactly the same design. And then at the end of her story, when she passes, you know, she kind of just dissolves, and it makes me feel like she's just a different kind of creature. And again, I don't know if there was more to that part of the story, but I don't know if we needed it. I think that's all we needed. You know, she's like the ultimate like Jedi character. You know, he's just going into the forest now, and everybody can have a piece.
Yeah, exactly.
She's just always there. So that I think that was really beautiful, and you've seen that over time in other films. It reminded me of Pocahontas and the Tree, and there's many other examples, but
it's like the greatest. You know, to me, she always represented the greatest connection to a forest, which is life makes way for more life. You know what I mean? And I think, you know, my instinct from her all that time is that she always understood that.
right.
And it's not that she's trying to stop things being killed. She understands the way of the world. Obviously, the machine is bad. It's wrong. You know, we got to stop this and hex this and everything. But it's like when she dissolves back into the forest, that's just the natural way of the
Right.
world. And there's no pain. It's pure peace. And I love that idea.
Yeah, and I was very young. It was probably the first time I was introduced to that concept, which has potentially become a cliche now. But it's so beautiful. And their connection, again, you don't really see Magic talking to anybody else, interacting with anybody else. So they really stay focused on that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that was really smart for the storytelling.
It is smart because you're creating I was going to say disconnect, but it's like an alternate voice in the world that supports, you know, the ultimate theme of the film, you know, and that's part of the reason why I was, you know, whatever about the father, whatever, he's nice, you know, he's fine, he's cool, he's there. But ultimately, you know, and I don't even think it was like a question of female power or anything like that. I think it was just pure respect for, okay, there are people like this in the world. There's people who are totally connected to what needs to happen, but people don't always take them seriously. I mean, in a way, it's almost like the hero's journey in that sense, like the old mentor that
Sure,
shows the
sure,
way to some
sure.
degree. But I wouldn't call Fern Gully by any means the hero's journey, you know?
No, it's definitely its own thing.
Yeah.
And another thing that I didn't realize until just now, honestly, is the Maggie and Krista thing, because you mentioned that she's the matriarch.
Yeah.
And that relationship is so important to the story. But the fact that I couldn't see it any other way, you know, because if you want to really get into the metatextual aspect of it, you know, the female energy of giving and nurturing, you know, it just makes sense. It just makes sense. I couldn't see her going to see an old man wizard.
Man wizard.
Worlds within worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the same. It doesn't hit the same.
Yeah.
But again, it's not preachy. It's not preachy about feminism or girl power or any of that. It's just that's just what supports the story.
And there's no throwaway lines of like, we women have to stick together. Yeah.
Exactly. Today there would have been.
Yeah, exactly. There will 100% be something like that.
Right.
Fern Gully is very strong in its message. There's no way to avoid that. But the way to tell that story is, it's a story. It's not a message.
Exactly. I love that.
I
love that. They were very focused on that. And again, I think that just comes from the inception. You know, it came from a very intimate place with this family, and they stayed true to that.
Yeah. Deeply true.
Yeah.
Deeply true.
Like, we care about this thing, but also, you know, this is something that has a lot of sentimental value. And they really were able to translate that, I think, in a beautiful way.
Do you know much about the production of it?
A little bit. I know that the producer had come off of Crocodile Dundee. That was like his big claim to fame. And, you know, with that being said, he already probably had an angle of environmentalism and for the animals and for things like that.
In Australia, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think he had worked in animation ever. And again, Quarry Productions wasn't a thing before Fern Gully. He got him to make this whole company just to make this film.
Did they hire in then? So they built a company to make this film?
They did, because they couldn't get anybody else to do it. They shopped it around as much as they could. I'm not sure the specific reasons why they got turned down so much, but the biggest houses were like, you know, they wanted Disney quality, but they couldn't get Disney talent until they did.
Yeah. Until they did.
Until they did.
And
And it got pretty ugly.
Go on, tell me more about
So Jim Cox was the screenwriter of this film, and he had worked on maybe a couple of treatments of Beauty and the Beast previous to this. Somehow they got him on board. I'm not exactly sure if that was a confrontational thing, but they got him on board to write Fern Gully. And since he had that relationship with Disney already, he literally went in there. He gave the producer, Bill Young, like a badge. This is the story I've heard.
Okay.
They went into the Disney studio together, and he basically pointed out the animators that he wanted to poach for Fern Gully. So that probably added to the drama on top of the Robin Williams thing.
Yeah.
But that's what they did. And at the time, it was a tough place to be. It was very abrasive culture in the Disney studio.
Especially with Katzenberg.
So they were like, let's go do this other crazy thing.
Yeah.
You know? And that's how you got the level of production design that you did, for sure.
Yeah, and which is high, very high.
Pretty high.
It totally holds up against anything that was coming out, like anything via the Disney Renaissance, as people term it, anything that's coming out of the Bluth Studios at that time. You know, things like what was he, Thumbelina? You know, that came out at a very similar time period.
That's another one that I had thought about too.
Was it?
Yeah, I would love that movie too. I don't know what it is, like a small person in a big world.
Yes,
I connect with that.
Small girl making her own way.
Yeah.
Because when we were talking earlier about comparative things, you were talking about Tinkerbell, but I was thinking of Thumbelina.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Again, that's one of the reasons why I love this podcast, because you have to put the film into the context of the time. Mm-hmm. And the ripple effects of Fern Gully, I think, are undeniable.
Yes.
You know, I had searched so hard for a connection between the Fern Gully artists and the El Dorado artists, because the visual language of Fern Gully is so reminiscent of the Christian Shellowall design of El Dorado Forest. But I couldn't find a connection. Maybe there was, maybe he just saw it. But there are some of those vines.
You mean you couldn't find it, like this person worked on that worked on this kind of connection?
I couldn't. For a minute I thought that I did, but I had been misinformed.
You dug deep.
I did. Wow. Because again, the environments are so important to me, and I really wanted to know who was responsible for them.
Yeah.
And I think it was definitely a team effort. And part of it just made me really think about all of the things, not just the environment, but the the way that the industry changed with the addition of Robin Williams. All of a sudden, you have big names on every movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you have fights for them. The the design, the crazy music. This movie was kind of in its own category at the time. Yeah, but there's so many other things that were inspired by it, and I don't think you can deny that.
You know, especially during the early 2000s, you had Disney versus DreamWorks, really.
Yeah.
They're the big studios competing.
For sure.
And Pixar. Sorry, guys. Pixar. But people always term Pixar under Disney because of, well, they own them. But it seemed to be that DreamWorks' big thing was just put names on posters.
Yeah.
Names, let's get big names on posters. Whereas I've never seen animated films. Generally, it's not tradition to put this stars that person. It's like the final step.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm in an interview, I never really ask about casting. Even though I know casting is huge, the actors playing the role, they always change the character dynamic. They always change the design based on the person as they're coming in.
Yep.
Even though they step in after all this design work, they're like, okay, they're adding something different, you know? But it's not a promotional thing. But that was the Katzenberg way.
For sure.
Yeah, big time. He
saw big money signs.
Yeah, every time.
And he changed the industry.
Yeah.
I mean, they were brazen about it. If you look at those first posters of Shrek, it was just the names of all the stars across the whole poster.
I totally agree. The ripple effects were huge in the industry with something like that.
A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, but it was a very competitive time, that era, in terms of hand-drawn animation. Because 3D didn't really exist then.
Well, I think they did use a little bit of 3D with the machine.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in terms of a full pipeline.
Sure. Yeah, that was definitely not a thing yet.
3D was totally, it was being like Beauty and the Beast 91. You've got things like Fern Gully, definitely. Aladdin, it all started piping in, you know, oh, look at this cool new toy. It always felt kind of out of place at that stage. But I think in Fern Gully, it didn't really. With the machine and stuff, it added to the terror. I think it was a stylistic choice.
For sure. That language, that visual language is so stark. You know, you have the harsh lines, you have the mechanical aspects, very contained in this one part of the film, and one part of the forest. And as it moves across the film and it moves across the story, it just brings danger. It just brings death.
Brings danger,
and
yes.
you're just constantly aware of it as a viewer.
I'm still aware of it. That's all I'm talking about. Honestly,
it's very effective.
Yeah, it really affected me, especially the slow crawl forward. Like it
true.
seemed
it
unstoppable.
It definitely takes its time, and I think that adds to the terror because it doesn't need to rush.
It doesn't.
It
need
knows
to rush.
that there's nothing that can take it down.
Yeah. Well, until it comes down, you know.
Well, I mean, I wonder how you feel about the ending, how they actually defeated Hexus.
I was fine about it.
Yeah, I think I was fine about it too, but as an adult, I'm not as fine with it.
Why? What's your problem now as an adult?
What's your problem now?
Yeah, what's your problem? God damn it, this is your choice.
I have very high standards now. Okay, Baby Kamille didn't have these standards. But the fact that all he had to do was press a button and turn it off. Hexus is done, you know. Yeah. But I think that to be fair, they added that extra element of she had to put the seed and she had to sacrifice herself for Hexus to really be done.
Yeah.
And I have a small anecdote about that because growing up, we used to eat watermelon a lot, and my parents would always make fun of us if we ate the seeds. Yeah, just tease us.
Grow in your belly.
It's going to grow in your belly.
Yeah.
And when that happened, they were like, "You see what happens? He ate the seed." I was scared of that.
Yeah.
That one scene, I was scared of that. That's when I was scared of Hexus. I was constantly aware of that.
It's funny your parents talked you out of eating seeds. The ending. Tell me about the ending, because I had forgotten the exact last frame.
I think the memory that sticks with me the most is a couple of different parts. You know, Krista has a very emotional goodbye to Zach, but it feels like they have a connection in that goodbye that is not, it doesn't need words. Yeah. You know, he basically tells her straight up that I want to be here, but I have a lot to do now. And it's just such a mature decision. And it's a different Zach than the beginning. And I love that so much because it's not over, you know, it's not hitting hard. Nobody told him this. Nobody told him that. He just had a perspective shift that changed him forever. She doesn't question it. She's sad, but, you know, she says goodbye and they don't draw it out. He walks away. And another thing, they don't make it overly romantic, which I love, which is another thing that is probably overdone, especially in this time period.
That's actually really true. And that's something I never thought about watching the film. Even as you're just saying it now. Yeah. Truly, like I never thought about the idea of it being over romanticized. There's no goodbye, love.
They don't even bother kissing. Like they have one awkward kiss in the whole movie and that's it.
So awkward. Yeah. Just like,
But it's so true to their age. I think there's one part where you see his license and it says he's 16. So that puts it in context of where they are in their life. And she's probably around the same age, at least in fairy terms. So it makes so much sense.
You don't know what awkward kissing.
Yeah, you don't know what it means. You don't know what these feelings are. So I think I found that really sweet.
And I'll compare it again to Hayao Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke ending because, you've got Sen, you've got, what's her name? Princess Mononoke, her name is Sen, right? San.
Yes, I believe so.
And why can I remember Spirited Away names right now?
I can't either.
Ashitaka and San. Okay, yeah. So you've got Ashitaka, and he's like, I understand you're of the forest. Your place is here. I need to go back to the humans. And that's a very mature ending. And that was released in 1997.
Oh, that's such a good point.
That came after Fern Gully. Mm. Do you think that was
Listen,
catalyst?
I'm telling you, Fern Gully has changed everything.
That's my favorite Ghibli film.
Really? Me too. Yeah. I have a hard time, I think, coming to terms with that sometimes because it's not the flashiest and it's not the most popular choice. Yeah. But I agree.
But it's so Fern Gully.
Is that why I love it?
Maybe, actually. It's because it's environmental. Again, it's this battle of humanity destroying the forest once more and, the natural world and the human world in conflict. And there's not there's this, obviously Princess Mononoke, there's big battles or whatever, but to stop the great evil force, the world is forever changed in doing that in Princess Mononoke. Whereas in Fern Gully, they press the button, the machine stops, the guy is forever changed, the forest is forever changed, the people in the forest are changed, the forest is the same.
Forest is the same.
Whereas at the very end of Princess Mononoke, even though the forest is destroyed, it starts to regrow as if nothing ever happened. Life returns.
And, thinking about it now, because I had some criticisms about the ending, about it being kind of a flat fight with Hexus and how you just press the button and he's dead. But maybe it is that simple. We make things so complicated.
I love this, yeah. 'Cause it's like, I didn't like it. Now it's I wasn't sure.
We make things so complicated. But I mean, in terms of the story of the film, I do still feel like it could have had a little bit more fight. And I do like the seed growing out of him. I think that was such a great visual. Such a beautiful visual. And, there is some stakes there because she flies into his mouth and you're not sure if she's going to make it out. And I love that. And
that's
again,
very well set up, actually, because you don't know. This feels very sacrificial. It's not like, she'll be all right.
And she doesn't think twice about it. She just goes. She knows what she has to do. And
very influential,
also,
yes.
Maybe. I think that she kind of has had, since she has such a close relationship with Magi, that she has had some kind of training to become the next matriarch, potentially. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if she's internalized that, but she does feel this, maybe not responsibility, but, this is what she needs to do. And nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah.
For sure, nobody else. They're all hiding in the bushes. Her father is, I don't know where he is. He's just there. And
monochromatic somewhere.
It's just her and Zach, and Pip is doing his part to be supportive, and I really love that about that character.
Yeah, he's not a traditional kind of side buff boy.
I don't really know what he is. Yeah. He is kind of her boyfriend, but they don't really go into that. I think that a lot of people chalk that up to a cultural thing with the fairies, where she doesn't know what a kiss is. She doesn't know, this like intimate physical affection, maybe, but they. And Zach has some sort of ornery boyfriend things in the beginning, but not so much in the rest of the film. So maybe that's just a cultural thing that they're getting at. But I do love that they never go full romantic into any of it. It's just not necessary.
If you were to say to someone who's watching Fern Gully for the first time, what would you hope they get out of it?
I think that the most important thing to me growing up was just the characters. Like, do the characters connect with you? it's if you didn't know this was about an environmentalism social commentary, would that have influenced you, you know, or did you even get that from the film? Because I didn't get that until I was much older, and it still doesn't bother me, you know. And if it does get to you, is it preachy? And I don't want to sound like I don't care about environmentalism. It's just that I don't need an agenda. I don't need a political agenda. That's going to be an instant turnoff.
As you fly away in your private jet. Yeah. No, I totally agree, because it ages it, and it centralizes it around something that's very particular to a time period. I think that's I don't really enjoy political humor for that reason. It's necessary to pull politics back down. Yeah. You know, to say you are not above criticism. Because, sure. You know, sometimes I watch brilliant comedians like Billy Connolly or something like that, and amazing when it's just telling stories from the human experience, but then he goes into a political rant I have no context for because it's 40 years ago. So I don't get it, you know, and that's why it's political humor, political stories, they're very specific to a time period. Right. Unfortunately, environmentalism is political, but it's a thing that we're constantly up against at the moment.
And I think it's important that it's a fun movie, you know? It's just a weird ride. You know, you never really know what's going to happen next. You have these bizarre animals that pop up, you know, they're not entirely important, but you get the idea that they are very intrinsic to that community.
Very intrinsic,
without any explanation.
Feels symbiotic.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't need to be over-explained. You know, there's so many films where you have like the guide walking the newcomer and explaining everything and how everything's connected and the color of the wind.
And then one joke, you know, it's like the typical thing of, oh, here's where the pineapples are delivered, and it cuts to two guys, and it's a funny scene, and then it cuts back. You know, it's a Pixar way.
Exactly. They don't
need that.
I don't know if it's a movie that doesn't have an ego. I think it just has a lot of heart, and it has a lot of...
A movie that doesn't have an ego. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I just think that it has so much heart that it's not focused on any of that. They just want to make sure that they're staying true to the story that is so important to them. And it's based on a real place, which is important. And they want to make that, you know, beautiful...
Tell us about the real place.
They are referencing very directly the Australian rainforest, because the creators of the story are from Australia. And, you know, they took several research trips. Well, maybe not several research trips, but they took at least one long research trip, 7 weeks going there. And there's many interviews where they talk about, you know, we couldn't have made up the glowing fungi. We couldn't have made up these cave things. We saw it. And we wouldn't have... The director, Bill Crowder, he talks about the fact that they didn't have much of a story before they went to the rainforest. Yeah. It all came together there. So I think that really comes to life in the film. You know, it is a central character. It is so important. It supports every emotional beat of the film. And that, I hope people get that out of it. I hope they do.
I hope so too. When they watch the making of and realize these things weren't just made up. But then again, there's bonkers made up things that are just like so fun and imaginative.
Well, for sure. I think that there's a balance. You can have super made up whimsical worlds that never existed if you have an experience that's attached to it.
Yeah, it needs to be grounded. And the film totally is. And I don't think it ever actually loses the run of itself in that. There's wacky kind of sequences, or, you know, like you said, toxic love, you know. You're just kind of like, okay, but... It never strays too far. Like, it always feels anchored, and it keeps circling back to that. Yeah. And that's hard to do, I think.
It is. And it's pretty tight, you know. The film has very little fat on it, I think, in terms of the narrative structure. Yeah. So they're very efficient at doing that.
Yes.
I mean, not that I was aware of that as a baby, 4 or 5 years old, but I can't help but think about those things now, because they're just so front and center when we watch films as adults.
The film that imprinted on me the most, animation-wise, was The Jungle Book. That came in 1967, the year I was born.
Did it really?
I was born in 1989. 1967, yeah. Walt Disney. And Walt Disney's last touch was on that film. And you can tell, because it's a triumph of character-driven storytelling. Yeah, it's really just characters. That's all it is. It's an onslaught of incredibly thought-out, living characters. Right. That's it, and I love that. And I connected so much with Baloo the bear.
They all have like a little vignette of their introduction,
Yeah.
you know, that explains everything that you need to know about them.
Exactly, and then they have a good time
Yeah.
or a bad time, and then we move on. So much so that the ending is just kind of like, oh, he's seen a girl, off he goes.
Right.
It's nonsense, you know. But I'll defend that movie to the end of time because that's what I imprinted. I used to think I was Mowgli.
You used to think you were Mowgli.
But yeah, like
Wow.
you know, in his little pink underwear or red underwear or whatever.
You just wanted to be a wild child.
Yeah, but we play on like pristine cut grass, granddad's like back garden.
You romanticized the jungle.
Yeah, we had a ladder in the grass. So I remember this much. This is real childhood coming back, and we'd run up and down the ladder. Me and my sister, who were like, she's a year older, so it's maybe 5, she was 6, and we'd both pretend to be Mowgli. We'd just run around in red
funny.
underwear. Yeah,
Oh my God.
bizarre, isn't it?
You know, I know that that's definitely a thing. I don't think I ever did that. I don't think I ever did the play acting of a character. I had a lot of characters I admired, but
Did you ever have an imaginary friend? Or?
No, I don't think I ever like barked like a dog or any of that. I never had like a doll that I would talk to. I never did any of that.
Do you think that's catching up now?
In what way?
Just in your life, are you more playful, or are you finding time for
I think
that?
I'm much more aware of how important it is to be playful because for so long I just, you know, work is just so important. There's not time to play around. And I still have, that's very front and center. It's in my day to day, but the connections that you build with people are not from that. You know, they're not from business meetings.
Right, certainly not.
They're from being playful and open and curious. And I just never really gave enough thought to that. And I don't know why I was that kind of kid. It's not that I didn't like to play, but I never really left reality in my play space.
I don't think I've met anyone.
Yeah, it's weird. I know it is weird. I mean, maybe the cops and robbers things or whatever, but it was never anything super fantastical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
And I know that's weird. I know a lot of kids do it.
Well, it's almost unique for an artist not to have that perspective because,
true.
you know, artists play in the world, but you always knew you wanted to draw.
I always did. I never had a choice. I think that it's interesting because as I've gotten older and I've worked in so many different environments, the way that I work is very different than a lot of artists. I am a very logical person, and I think people think of artists as just crazy and you're just doing things. Everything is zen and it's just coming to you. The muse is here, it's not there. It's like, no, it's a discipline. You know, I'm here to work now. And I think that the imagination has to come from somewhere real for me. So like when I have a plan, I have a process, and I very much rely on that in my work.
Yeah. That's I've said it to you before that you're very, I said production, but I think it's your practical is the word I was looking for. You're practical in how you approach things, which is a strength, a real strength, because you've got business acumen then in terms of being able to plan. A lot of artists just draw and that's it and give up and mess and it's mess. There's no plan, there's no structure. So it's like, okay, how do you stand out in a saturated world?
Mm-hmm.
You find the thing where in a world of rounded stones, you've got to be the spiky one or have one at least.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's like pairing things together that don't seem like they should work together, but actually become a great advantage. And I think that's your practicalness, your practical nature to be able to plan things, stick to it.
I mean, it's definitely something that I had to hone, and it just came out of struggle. You know, I have to be resourceful and I have to be self-sufficient, and the only way to do that is to have a plan. And I've always wished that I was one of these people that could just draw from imagination. I have friends that do that, but it's stressful for me. It's pretty stressful. I need some reference or something, and
Greatest use of imagination is creativity, and the worst use is stress. And they're on
you
the
have
same
to follow
thing.
that. You have to follow that. And I'm not saying that I have no imagination. You know, when
I mean, you love Fern Gully.
I love Fern Gully, and when I paint things, I am making things up sometimes, but it's from a skill set that I've built. You know, I've trained my skills in color and light so that I can make a painting with any color sky. I can make the lighting whatever I want, depending on what the mood is. But that didn't come from nowhere. And I think that when I talk to students, I try to make that very clear. Like, this is not, we're not here to play around. You know, we're building a skill. Talent is one thing, but you have to work.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you are to play around a little bit. Come on, you got to give them something.
Like this hustle culture thing.
Yeah,
there's a time for that, and you just have to bite the bullet sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, what's the thing? It's a dream until you write it down. It's a goal.
For sure.
And until
some
you
people
break
love
it down,
living in the dream.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're stuck in there.
Yeah.
And once you break it down, it becomes a plan, not a goal. And once you start following the steps, it becomes a reality, you know, rather than staying in dreamland. And
we all want to be there.
One day. Yeah, I mean, it's great to live in your head, but the world is outside it as well. And that's even more fun, you know, at least to me anyways.
I have a take on fun also. I
ration it.
I think that a lot of people are very, very concerned with enjoyment. You know, they will make decisions on whether or not they enjoy things. And I have become very cognizant of the fact that that's not the most important thing. You don't have to be enjoying things all the time. And I think that part of that is coming to understand this idea of enlightenment maybe, or of Zen. You know, you just are. You just have to be okay with being sometimes. And that is actually maybe the best place you could be. You're not enjoying it. You're not sad, but you just are. And that's a hard place to be. Everybody gets fidgety. You know, they got to do something. They got to distract themselves so that you feel like you're, I don't know, getting something out of it.
It's like the childhood experience is awe and
yeah,
and watching and just absorbing. And I think that's really what we're trying to get back to. I love what you say there, because, you know, there's a big difference between happiness and there's a big highs. People think that highs are happiness, but they're chasing. It needs to get bigger and bigger. Oh, I'd love to do this. I'd love to do that. I don't know if you've had the experience of seeing your name in the credits for the first time.
Yeah.
It's a high.
Huge.
But 2 days later, 3 days later, you know, is it still the exact same feeling? It's not.
It's not, but it's different. I think that I can still connect to that feeling and be really proud of myself and still appreciate that. That first credit is always going to be the first credit.
Exactly.
And it doesn't even have to be that. It can be that first email. I have an email that I saved a screenshot from a studio that I've just sought after for years. And that email of like, welcome to the team is so important to me. Yeah. And those are just those small wins that are really, really important to cherish.
So you've found the happiness there. You know what I mean? That's the happiness. Whereas the highs are like, it's almost like, you know, being aware. It's total awareness, I think, is really happiness. It's the awareness, the awe. And when you're able to kind of sit down, you know, a lot of the time we live in our heads, which means that we're either anxious about the future or regretting about the past. Yeah. But regret does not live in the present, and anxiety does not live in the present. You know, if you really think about it, most of the positive experiences in your life generally happen in the present. It's the awe. You're able to sit by a lake like we were yesterday, just absorb it and be happy and love that moment and just be grateful for it. So the very fact that you're able to think to yourself, I'm aware that I'm stressing now for something for tomorrow, generally means that right now is okay. You're not being chased by a tiger. You know what I mean? And that's a very comforting thought to me. It's just like, oh, tomorrow will be tough. That means right now is okay because I have the time to think about it.
I like that. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Different way of thinking. I only came across that recently.
No, it definitely has a much better perspective than like, oh, I don't want to think about that right now.
I mean, which is typically... That can help as well.
Well, I mean, I think all of this is relevant to Fern Gully, to be honest with you, because we have talked about the childhood experience being very pure, being very experiential, and the way that they created this film definitely mirrors that because it's not overthought. There's not a lot of exposition. There's almost no exposition. The characters are just doing things. Yeah. Especially Krista. She is just acting on intuition, and she is not apologizing about it. Yeah. She doesn't ask for permission ever. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't care. It doesn't mean she's selfish because everything that she's doing is pretty selfless. She cares about the forest. She cares about her family. And she's not going to stand by if something is going to threaten those things. And I think that what they've done a really good job with Krista is not making it seem like she got that way because of this person or because of this thing. She just is that way. And I think that I really relate to that as well. She just doesn't have a choice, you know?
She doesn't have a choice. That's great. Just like you didn't to come here.
Exactly.
Yeah, what you don't see off the camera is the gun point. Say good things about Fern Gully.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cole. This has been amazing.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for your presence, of course. As you know, I'm sure, well, if you don't know, I'm telling you. Your candor and, of course, your vulnerability. I think these are great strengths that you bring to any table. And I'm very glad to spend time with you, and especially talk about something you love. So thank you so much.
I'm just so honored to be a part of the slate of your incredible, empathetic conversations, and just to have the chance to go into depth about these things with somebody that really understands how important, animation can be for the people that we become.
Thank you so much. That's sweet.